Iceberg videos are a real favourite of mine, and given the secretive nature of the Souls games, I just assumed there would be plenty of Iceberg videos to go around. Nope, not really. While I've found a couple on Dark Souls, Bloodborne and even Sekiro, I've seen absolutely none dedicated to Demon Souls, so I figured I'll go ahead and make one myself. Sources from where I found the content for the Iceberg will be linked in the description in case you want to check them out for yourself. You probably already know, but for those who don't, Iceberg videos go over facts and trivia about a particular subject. More common and obvious stuff is at the top, more obscure, weird and creepy things towards the bottom. Now, let's get into the Iceberg. Sticky white stuff. In the Shrine of Storms and the pools full of slugs, you can pick up sticky white stuff which applies a magic buff to your weapons. In the remake, it's been changed to sticky white slime, and that's probably to try and distance it from some, very obvious connotations. Tendency events. One of the main mechanics of Demon Souls is world tendency. Good acts such as killing bosses puts it towards white, and evil acts such as killing NPCs and dying in body form puts it towards black, giving access to certain items and special events in the world. The Maiden in Black is trapped in the Nexus. Yeah, sometimes it's easy to forget considering how willing she is to help you, but the Maiden in Black is a demon from the first Scourge, and is trapped thanks to the Nexial binding, presumably from the Monumental, that traps the player tied to her ankle. She doesn't really have much of a choice to help you, to be fair, but it's still nice of her, I guess. Ostrava's real name. Something that the game also tells you, but it's also pretty easy to forget. Ostrava is a pseudonym. His real name is Ariona Relant. Makes sense considering he's the prince, you know, the son of Relant. Although most people will die to him on a first playthrough, I know I did, you're able to defeat the Vanguard in the tutorial. Do so and you'll be rewarded with some items that are pretty valuable for early game. You'll still be punched to death by the Dragon God though, and in the PS5 remake you can also get a fluted helm that looks a lot closer to the original design. The corpse you get it from is also in a very similar pose to the original Japanese cover art. Now that we've covered the top of the iceberg, let's get into the shallow waters. Mephistophiles and the Foes Ring. If you kill Yurt and have pure black character tendency, an NPC named Mephistophiles will show up in the Nexus and task you with killing a certain amount of NPCs. Fulfill her quest and she'll give you the Foes Ring before attempting to kill you herself. The Monumental and the Friends Ring. The Monumental also has his own little quest line. In the beginning of the game, after the cutscene explaining how the world came to be as fucked as it is, if you say yes to the Monumental's question and get the pure white character tendency, he'll give you the Friends Ring. What's interesting though is if you say no to accepting his mission, he kind of pauses and wonders if the player hates him. Makes him seem a little bit less like the emotionless type he portrays himself as. Lord Ridiel's origins. Ridiel is widely referred to as Little Elant in Boletaria, meaning he's more than likely a younger brother of King Elant. This is honestly a point that I'm really surprised isn't brought up more in the game via NPCs or item descriptions, to be honest. Phantoms of Boletarian Knights. In the room just after the Penetrator boss fight, there are 3 black phantoms the player will come across. These are the true forms of the demonic reflections that have been fought as bosses in Boletaria. The bow wielder is Longbow Ulan, the Phalanx, Alfred is the Tower Knight, and Metas the Penetrating Knight being, well, the Penetrator. Good for him. Another added feature is in the remake, where when you defeat the respective bosses, an outline of their old selves will show briefly before the, I guess, soul energy will fade away. The Fate of Valifax. Valifax is the other half of the Twin Fangs, however unlike Bjor he's never seen in game. From what I've been able to research, there's 4 possible endings to his story, all unfortunate. In my opinion the most boring one, he died outside of Boletaria after telling neighbouring nations about the situation. Theory 2, he was captured and killed by Executioner Meralda, evidenced by his armour set being found on a corpse she watches over. Theory 3, he was killed battling or was fed to the nesting dragons in 1-1, supported by the Ring of Great Strength found next to them. And finally, the most unlikely in my opinion, a demonic copy went outside of Boletaria, and that's why power-hungry individuals seem to gather in Boletaria, as that's what would sustain the old one. Item duping. A pretty infamous glitch. By talking to Blacksmith Baldwin with the Nexial Binding equipped, when you go to put the item you want to dupe to Stockpile Thomas, then rapidly press circle, you'll cancel out of the animation and Stockpile Thomas will have 1023 of the item you want to duplicate. The Shrine of Storms skip. In the first section of the Shrine of Storms, if you're fast rolling, you can roll onto part of the environment and drop down near the Adjudicator's boss room, skipping most of the level. Now we're going further from the shallow waters and into the deep waters. The Old One and God. It's heavily implied that despite what the faithful in Boletaria's world may tell you, there is either no god, or the old world itself is the god, or the closest thing to god in the Demon Souls world, thanks to the Talisman of Beast description, which states, "The symbol of God was nothing more than the image of the Old One." The Ring of Sincere Prayer. This ring makes you do the Praise the Sun pose. It was hidden behind a ring because Miyazaki liked it and a higher up told him to remove it. I don't think there's anything else to it, but theory crafting that this might have a connection to Dark Souls' Land of Lordran might be fun. The Hornet's Ring. The Hornet's Ring is a ring in Dark Souls 1 that makes you do the Demon Souls animations when you get a parry. I didn't know this for a long time until researching for my Dark Souls analysis, but it's such a cool little detail, I really like it. The Remake Door. In the PlayStation 5 Remake, there's a hidden door that can be accessed after getting 30 ceramic coins and trading them with Sparkly the Crow in Fractured mode, getting a rusty key. Behind the door is an armor set for the Penetrator, which wasn't in the original game. Sparkly the Crow? So speaking of the devil, there's a chance that Sparkly the Crow, well, isn't a crow. Apparently there's code in the game referring to a double-winged hawk girl, and the name in the AI is Taka, meaning hawk. Moreover, hawks circle the nest in the Shrine of Storms. Although it's impossible to make out what they actually look like in game, there's a character model who I believe is Sparkly, and I'll throw up a picture now. Witches are persecuted in Boletaria. Witches really don't have a good time of it in Boletaria, most obviously with Uria, trapped in a tower with fat ministers being subjected to unspeakable acts in the name of purification, as Bjork puts it. The sight of corpses that have items that are also likely belonging to witches right next to poor Uria also tells us this isn't uncommon. And if that's not enough, the two hanging corpses in 1-1, being the daughter and wife of Stockpile Thomas, were likely killed for being suspected witches. There's even cut dialogue that was probably from the daughter if the accent is anything to go by. It's 20 seconds long, so I'll play it for you now.
Are you human? Oh, the pain and the ghastly odour. Please, put me out of my misery. Please have mercy on me. Oh, thank you. Forgive me, Father.
The Fool's Idol's Body. The Fool's Idol was a demon made in the image of the Queen of Latria. That's part of how people have been so willing to follow her. But the old monk tends to make his demons himself based on what I could find in lore. So that begs the question, is it just a puppet made in the image of the Queen like the demonic King Eland? Or is it the actual reanimated corpse of the Queen being used by the old monk? The Man-Eater's Tail. Whether this is a cut animation or it's just very unlikely to see, I'm not 100% sure, but if you didn't know, the Man-Eater boss can be stunned by the serpent that is its own tail biting itself, which really goes far in showing how much of a dickhead the old monk is. He even makes his own creations intentionally live in presumably unending agony for no reason. The Noblewoman's Song. In Latria, the noblewoman trapped in one of the cells in 3-1 will be singing a little song. In the original, it feels like they made it to add a bit more atmosphere and ambience, but in the remake they changed it to her singing Return to Slumber, the credit song of the original game. I believe this was done not only as a callback to the original game, but to make her intentions a little bit more obvious. She's singing in order to soothe the remaining prisoners into staying so they won't go over to the Fool's Idol's church and be transformed into more demons for the old monk to use. And now we're moving further into the depths. Cracked Talisman of Beasts. The Cracked Talisman of Beasts is, just as the name implies, a broken talisman, meaning that spells will do next to nothing. However, this isn't the case with the Cursed Weapon spell, which applies a 50% physical damage buff, but drains 1% of your HP per second. Instead, you'll get the 50% buff, but the damage will lower by a single point per second, basically erasing the penalty. Leechmonger Corpse Loot. So the Leechmonger boss room is pretty weird. Throughout the first section of the Valley of Defilement, you can use the game's ragdoll physics to throw bodies into the abyss. You'd think this wouldn't really do anything, but the more corpses of depraved ones that are thrown in, the more items will actually appear in his boss room. Flamelurker's Origins. The identity of the Flamelurker is also somewhat of a mystery, but a few theories do surround it. Some believe in life he was the legendary Big M who punched dragons to death, or that he was an ancestor of the blacksmith's Ed and Baldwin due to his facial design looking a little bit like a helmet or safety equipment a blacksmith could wear, or potentially he could be the last king of the boroughs of Stonefang from ages ago. Stonefang and Boletaria's connection. The miners in Stonefang are completely soul-starved, watched over by fat ministers and singularly focused on mining for said ministers. At this point, the entire mining industry in Stonefang seems to be solely for crafting weapons and armour for the Boletarian war effort. The 6th Broken Archstone and the Northern Limit. In the Nexus, there's a Broken Archstone, explained in-game as a last-ditch effort to try and contain the demonic epidemic. This obviously didn't work. There are some wild theories on what could have been, most trying to connect it to other FromSoft games. The main thing I've heard with the Archstone being connected to Lordran, which has been described as a land of giants like the Northern Limit, and Broken Trees in Ash Lake, which have been theorized to hold up specific worlds in Dark Souls. Another idea being that the Northern Limit is Yharnam, which has been overrun by an epidemic of beasts, but thanks to some very talented people, we have an idea on what the Northern Limit could have been. It's a snowy, mountainous area that also features a few cut enemies. A serpent soldier, a mimic-type enemy, a woman covered in insects, a yeti with a stomach mouth, a generic soldier NPC, a soldier NPC on the ground, which seems to be an event in the level that was never programmed, and finally a noble-looking NPC with a cane. Cut enemies. The enemies described before aren't the only cut enemies in the game. As far as I know, these can only be found on test maps, but they are as follows. A wolf warrior, a bear warrior, a hyena warrior, an owl mage, a wounded wolf, a demonic bird, and finally a Hydra from the game Ninja Blade. The last enemy was almost definitely used for testing purposes, but the rest of the enemies all clearly have a beast theme. Perhaps the Northern Limit was meant to be intended to be populated with beasts, considering the Yeti found in there shares a lot of design similarities with the rest of the beast models, but it's hard to be able to say for sure. The Monumental's mortality. Originally, you were able to kill the Monumental with death lines even being recorded.
But I am a Monumental.
This was cut, however, and if you try to kill the Monumental now, he'll just laugh at you. And now we've arrived in the Abyss. Astraea could be a witch. At first I kind of rolled my eyes at this theory, but reading deeper into it there is some evidence to support it. I'm going to read the theory verbatim. Her Ring of Sincere Prayer states that she found it as a young child, which is what marked her as the 6th saint, as in the 6th young woman to have found a revelation from God. However, we also know from the Ring of Magical Nature that witches were also marked by their being born with or finding early trinkets from magical properties, such as Uria. Given that we know late game that faith and sorcery are both derived from the Old One, it is entirely possible that Astraea's wealthy status is all that protected her from being branded as a witch herself. Rather than her magical ability being seen as evil, it was accepted as heavenly. This would align with the general hypocrisy surrounded by Church of God as seen in-game as well. It's certainly interesting to think about, and I like how it re-emphasizes the hypocrisy already shown by the Church, but I don't personally think she is one. Latria and Mercury. This theory proposes that the reason why the prisoners in Latria are so passive is that the old monk has fried their brains with mercury, pretending that he had gifted them with silver. Personally, I believe they're just soul-starved, but it does add another layer on how sadistic the old monk is. Unknown Child Model. As the name implies, there's a model of a very skinny child in the files of Demon Souls that went unused. This is most likely the child that the filthy woman speaks about in the Valley of Defilement. This would have obviously gave her claims a lot more credence, but I prefer that this was cut. I like the angle of her truthfulness about the existence of the child a lot better than it just being cut and dry, personally. Crocodile stew. In the tutorial, there's big pots of stew cooking. It's pretty ambiguous on where they get the meat for the stew from, and I think there's meant to be an implication that cannibalism was common in these outposts in Boletaria, but there was meant to be a crocodile carcass hanging on ropes, but for whatever reason they were cut. There is also a deer model in the files, and I believe they probably would have been used for the same purpose. Simpsons references. Yes, I'm serious. In the North American instruction manual, under the character creation screenshot, you can see names that are references to certain Simpsons episodes. These include Bobo, the bear Mr. Burns owned as a child from the episode Rosebud, Lisa Lionheart, a doll that Lisa attempted to market in the episode Lisa vs. Malibu Stacy, and Princess Kashmir, an exotic dancer first appearing in the episode Homer's Night Out. King Allant and depression. It's no secret that by the time you meet King Allant, he's sick of the state of the world. In-game it states that he was already in a melancholic state by the time he woke up the Old One. Although the world was definitely in a sorry state at this time, it could be theorized he's projecting his sadness onto the world, and his heart was not fully into becoming a demon for the Old One, resulting in a botched transformation that we see in the game. The tutorial Vanguard. So the theory goes is that the Vanguard in the tutorial's capture was either done or thought of by the Monumental, in order to ensure that warriors could be trapped in the Nexus. Now I personally don't believe this theory, but it's a really interesting idea that makes the Monumental a bit darker than first thought. Maiden Astraea is making things worse. The game seems to go out of its way to portray Maiden Astraea in a good light, stating she abandoned her religion and former life as a noble in order to cleanse the Valley of Defilement. But is she really making things better? She sits on valuables, most likely offerings from devout followers who go out and kill in order to bring souls and valuables back to her. She doesn't really seem to do anything about this either. Moreover, an idea that the way she brings peace of mind to the people of the valley is to take their souls, and in turn their minds so they can't really think about the misery they're in, essentially performing a lobotomy on the villagers. I really like this idea personally, very much reminds me of the saying the road to hell is paved with good intentions. The Ring of the Chieftain. This was supposedly a ring bought from Yurt towards the end of the game. This is a hoax. The only thing he'll do is kill the other characters like the bastard man he is. Tell-all. This was a cut NPC that from what I can gather was meant to be like an evil counterpart to the Monumental. I think that's why you were able to kill the Monumental initially, because you would still have Tell-all to explain how the world of Demon Souls works to the player. Apparently a character model for Tell-all does exist, wearing a rogue set with the assassin's mask, but I've never been able to find this myself. Again, this is just purely me speculating, but I think Tell-all was probably repurposed to be Mephistophiles, given that it's the same voice actor and she's the closest thing to an evil equivalent of the Monumental in-game, due to her connection to the Soul Society. The Crestfallen Warrior's theory is correct. At some point in the game, the Crestfallen Warrior will claim the Monumental revived the Old One on a whim, and they are desperately trying to undo their mistake. Perhaps they taught Allant the soul arts or instructed the Maiden in Black to, and that's how they played a part in reviving the Old One. True Death Mode. There seemed to be an extra challenging mode which was scrapped, where if you died in soul form, you lost a significant amount or all of your progress. The cut dialogue from the Crestfallen Warrior is unclear how much exactly you would lose, but given the name I would guess that all progress would be lost and you would need to start again from scratch, excluding rebuilding your character.
Go on, run off and find the blood script, and get that corpse of yours back before it rots. If you die once more, you lose everything, including all the precious souls you've obtained. Well, so you've died completely this time.
Bloodborne was more connected to Demon Souls. In the online test demos of Bloodborne, there were a few more connections to Demon Souls, primarily with the regular use of Umbasa, a word heavily used by the religious characters in Demon Souls. Miyazaki has stated that they are all in separate universes, but it's fun to speculate what could have been, and if the original intention was to add more nods to Demon Souls and Bloodborne and ended up being cut, as the two are quite similar, especially with the overarching theme of a hypocritical religion or ruling body, being with the Church in Demon Souls and the Healing Church in Bloodborne. 1-2 Town. With the use of hacking, you're able to explore the town off in the distance in Boletaria 1-2. At first I thought it would be something like a flat image or texture, but a surprising amount of the town has been modelled, including to scale houses, a church and a fountain. Although they aren't really textured, it's still evident that a significant amount of work was put into this. Perhaps it was intended to be explorable at one time? Even in this video, just walking around the town gives me quite an eerie feeling, imagining what life could be like for the people before or even during the start of the Demon Scourge, before the town being presumably abandoned. June 8th, 2008 build, do not research. This allegedly is a build from back when the game was set to be an Elder Scrolls-like killer as Sony originally intended, but due to technical limitations, Miyazaki took over the project, limiting how advanced the eye of the game truly was. Or so we think. The Serpentine Apparition. As I alluded to in the last point, there's much more to Demon Souls than we know. With the increased popularity in part thanks to the remake, the people's cognition have twisted the game due to the desire of having the cut Northern Limit included in the game. Reports have spotted the Serpentine Woman from the Northern Limit in certain areas of the game, although reports have varied to include such models as the Owl Woman and even Tell-All. If you see any of these models, turn off the game and the console as soon as possible, as they can enact havoc on your file, enabling the true death mechanic and randomly changing of world and character tendency on the fly. I managed to get this very real and very intense screenshot of the Serpentine Woman in Boletaria before it was too late. But finally, the most terrifying point in the iceberg of all. Old King Doran's death scream. As you can probably guess, the last few were jokes, but that really does bring our iceberg to a close. This has been really fun to do. I've taken facts, theories, and bits and pieces of information all around the internet to try and make an entertaining iceberg. But with these games, as I'm sure you can imagine, there's tons more facts and theories that can be included. So please tell me in the comments anything interesting you think I may have missed, and if you want me to cover any of the other FromSoft games, or just games in general, or any specific icebergs to read, please let me know. As I said at the start of the video, I've not seen an iceberg dedicated to Demon Souls, which really surprised me, so I wanted to get that done first more than anything. I'm still working on other videos akin to my previous content, but if people like it, I'll probably cover more icebergs in the future, as I just really like iceberg videos in general. But until then, thanks for watching, and take care. Bye bye.